Now in local news, we're going to be talking about the D.C. crime bill that's grabbed national headlines for interesting reasons, because the District of Columbia, where we are right now, is a federal district, is the federal district that is enshrined in the Constitution. Ryan and I almost certainly disagree, although I don't know that we've ever talked about this before, over the question of home rule and D.C. statehood. But the bill itself grabbed a lot of headlines because Republicans in Congress latched onto it after it looked as though, and this is where I take issue with some of the media coverage, including from DCist, which had a pretty good write-up of it, WAMU DCist, that said the bill got scuttled by Republican backlash. Well, Muriel Bowser did not want to sign this bill. Joe Biden himself tweeted that while he supports home rule and D.C. statehood, I have the exact quote right here, while he supports home rule and D.C. statehood, he was also, here he said, I support D.C. statehood and home rule, but I don't support some of the changes D.C. Council put forward over the mayor's objections, such as lowering penalties for carjackings. If the Senate votes to overturn what D.C. Council did, I'll sign it. The carjacking provision of this very complicated bill that attempts to make some modifications to a 1901 criminal code. By the way, that's before people had cars to jack.
And Biden probably thinks it's a car jack.
Yeah, right. It's totally been massaged. Like any nuance has been out the window in this national conversation. Ryan, you have a good point to make, though, about the maximum penalty for carjackings being changed.
Oh yeah, and maybe we have that element here. But what's amazing is the way that this reduction in maximum penalties from 40 years to something like 24 years is getting talked about as this this lowering of penalties. Yes, like technically it's a lowering of penalties, as if it's going to spur some like soft on crime explosion of carjackings around Washington, D.C. Something like 99% of the sentences that are doled out for carjacking now are significantly under what is the maximum. Like the current maximum allows, I think, for like 40 years for an armed carjacking. And so they lowered that to like 20-something.
Yeah.
The mandatory minimums for carjackings in D.C. currently, and even in the new criminal code, if it were enacted, would still be higher. And we're pointing this out then in, say, Tennessee, where Bill Haggerty is leading the charge against this thing. Tennessee's law is more liberal when it comes to carjackings and armed carjackings.
more liberal, even though it's basically just a normal penalty.
Yeah, it's a gigantic mandatory minimum that, like, 60 years ago, people would be like, that's insane. Like, how on earth are you going to put people in prison for that long? Now we just like, 15 years for this? Yeah, you're going to do 15 years for this. So they're barely loosening the penalties, and it's in a rewrite of an entire code. And to have Joe Biden say, I support a thing in principle, but not when it might cause me some short-term political cost, potential political cost, and he may now have brought more cost on himself, because now everything the D.C. Council does, reporters are going to get to say, hey, Joe Biden, what do you think of this? Because there's a D.C. Council provision that is allowing non-U.S. citizens, would allow non-U.S. citizens to vote in local elections. To me, I think if you are subject to the laws of an area where you live, then principle says you should have some say, no matter what. Even if you're in prison, you should have some say over what those laws are. But you can disagree with that. But now all of a sudden, that's going to be something Joe Biden's going to have to. He's going to have to answer for everything that the D.C. Council does. Yesterday, I heard reporters on Capitol Hill asking Republican senators, "What do you think of allowing non-citizens to vote?" And me, a D.C. resident, I'm thinking, "Oh, really? That's interesting. How about citizens who can't actually vote for senators or members of the House of Representatives? All of a sudden, you're so concerned about the right to vote." And they're like, and they're shaking their head like, "Yeah, we don't approve of this." It's like, we shouldn't have to ask you. Like, it's one thing that we don't get to vote, for House, for Senate. They have a workaround so that we can vote for president. But then you're going to come in and you're going to kind of line edit our criminal code and say, actually, 24 years for carjacking, I think it should be 40. Like, get out of here.
Okay, so we are hitting on where we disagree with this, because here's A National Review article actually cited a Madison quote from Federalist 43. Now I sound like a real loser. He says the indispensable necessity of complete authority at the seat of government carries its own evidence with it. Without it, not only the public authority might be insulted and its proceedings interrupted with impunity, but a dependence of the members of the general government on the state comprehending the seat of government for protection in the exercise of their duty might bring on the national councils an imputation of awe or influence equally dishonorable to the government and dissatisfactory to the other members. So I would just say of the Confederacy, because this was in the era of the Federalist Papers. So I think we could have a whole debate one day about home rule and DC statehood, but I do think the federal city should be subject to federal rule and by a wide scope. And this is in the broader context. And I think to your point, actually, about why this is such a ridiculous thing for Bill Hagerty from Tennessee to be swooping in and like line item vetoing DC City Council crime overhauls, is that it is obvious if you walk around the District of Columbia post-pandemic that there's a lot of recovery that needs to happen. It is obvious that we are dealing with particular crime surges, not across the board. Actually, violent crime did decrease from 2021 to 2022. According to Axios, though, for the second year in a row, DC exceeded 200 murders in 2022, and some crimes did see...
We have that chart.
Yeah, we also have a chart, but that's where we are so far in 2023 here in the district. So in 2022, robberies were up 2%, car thefts were up 8%, like in a lot of cities, and carjackings were up 14%. If you look at the chart that's on the screen right now, you can see, for instance, between 2022 to 2023, the same day in March 7th, we are from 29 to 39 homicides. That's a 34% increase 3 months into the year, 120% increase in sex abuse, theft in general. We're up to, I can't read the number on the screen, but it is up. It looks like 18%. Car theft from auto, 22%.
2 of those were mine.
Oh, that's right. Leave Ryan alone. Motor vehicle theft up 110%. So again, these are early numbers, but it's obvious to everybody why there is no appetite, even from the Washington Post, which editorialized that the bill would make DC, quote, a more dangerous city by decreasing, quote, punishments for violent crimes such as carjackings, home invasion, burglaries, robberies, and even homicides, and tying, quote, the hands of police and prosecutors while overwhelming courts. That's other stuff in this bill. It's a very big bill that can be debated as what this would do to the court system. There are arguments, I think serious arguments, that it would overwhelm the court system because of changes there. And so when you even have the Washington Post, Muriel Bowser coming out against a bill like this, I do think it signals, despite this weird conversation about carjackings we've had, and especially when Republicans insert themselves, national Republicans, into this local conversation, there's just no appetite in so many big cities right now for criminal justice reform, even if some of it, by the way, would reduce crime. And would make cities safer. Nobody wants to talk about it, period, because there's, our cities do feel dirtier to a lot of people. They feel less safer to a lot of people. And I think National Democrats have a lot to answer for, not just in terms of the criminal code, but really just in terms of the way they govern these cities.
And a significant bump in the crime wave came out of, the pandemic. People frustrated, fewer people on the street, allowing people to commit more crimes of opportunity. But
also arguably undercutting of police, both with rhetoric and legally.
Well, undercutting of police having their feelings hurt and deciding that they're not going to do their job anymore, I think is a serious thing. And
or having their power curtailed in neighborhoods, by the way, where Black residents said they wanted more police and not less police, as the national movement pushed a lot of people in places like San Francisco. Even London Breed walked back some of those policies. I
don't think there's necessarily been any evidence yet that places that did criminal justice reform and police reform have had different crime increases than places that didn't. So if you look at like red states around the country, you see the same crime bump even in places that never had never got much police reform traction. What you did see is a slowdown in call response, and like Baltimore being like the most egregious response, where they were like, cool, then you don't like the way we do our jobs, how about we just don't do our jobs at all? Or
a lot of police departments are now severely hampered because nobody wants to work in them, given how demonized they feel.
Yeah. No, that recruiting is big, recruiting for any job anywhere has become a problem, and it's acute within the police force.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Soccer and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.